I can do a standing front flip. I've literally jumped with a grown man on my shoulders during a takedown, and I did this weird Nathan Drake double jump thing.
Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. Intel has told us there are at least 7.
Okay, I already see one. Give them. Okay.
They're the same picture.
But with that being said, I basically think it's fair to say I've got some expertise when it comes to power development. And today I want to give you 3 things you can do to get so explosive that people think you're cheating.
That's fucking illegal.
But before we jump into it, let's just clarify, when we're talking about power, we are talking about movements where you need to produce a lot of force in a short period of time. So some really great examples of this can be things like power cleans, it can be sprint accelerations, it can be doing a muscle up, it can be doing a med ball slam. What we want to see is something that is happening in a very short period of time. So this isn't something like a deadlift. Even though you're producing a large force with a deadlift, when you're doing a heavy deadlift, it's going to realistically take you 3 to 5 seconds to do that rep. You are simply not producing that force fast enough. When you look at moving an equivalent clean, say you're cleaning 100 kilos, the speed at which you accelerate that bar at the top point before you turn around is happening in half a second. It's happening like boom, you're accelerating and you're dropping under. So it's just these movements where things happen a lot faster. It is a little bit general. It can be everything from sprinting to jumping to doing power cleans. But the main thing you need to ask yourself is, am I producing a really large amount of force really fast? If the answer is yes, then you are doing a power movement. And with that, let's jump into these tips that are going to help you get so powerful, people think you're cheating. Number 1, perform maximum effort jumps 1 to 3 times a week. And I know just saying do some jumps is a pretty wide spectrum, so I'm going to give you some details here. When we're talking about max effort jumps, we're talking about doing anywhere between 1 and 3 jumps maybe in a row, maybe creeping it up to 5 if it was something like a bounding broad jump, where you're going to be putting in absolute maximal effort. You're going to be looking to go as hard and as far and as fast as you can. This is very much like working maximal strength work. You're going to need to be resting 3 to 5 minutes between these sets, and it's going to be lower volume, so 3, 4 sets. And this can look like a lot of different things. A few of my favorite variations for maximal effort jumps are deep yielding split stance jumps. I'll put some of these on the screen now because these are just kind of names I've given them. I don't know if it's the official name. Bounding broad jumps. And I really like doing some seated box jumps. I think that's an awesome way to develop rate of force development and really get some power out of your legs. And I just like to implement these jumps 1 to 3 times a week. So normally I would suggest doing this at the start of your workout, do a little bit of a warm up, then hit this jump training. And it can be a really great way to prime yourself for some Olympic lifting or some heavy lower body work. So just get this jump training in. It makes a massive difference. Number 2, high velocity and high force core training.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Now, I know that also sounds a little bit general, but let me get into this. If you look at athletic movements across the board, you're going to see the normal functions of the core. Rotation, extension and flexion sagittally, flexion laterally, rigidity. And we see all of these functions that turn up in day-to-day movements turn up in athletic movements like flips, like punches, like impacts in rugby. So basically, we need to train our core to deal with these forces if we ever actually want to be able to be genuinely powerful and output these athletic feats of power. So you need to train your core to these high intensities. That can look very different depending on the quality. So let's talk about some examples. If we were thinking about lateral flexion, one I really like doing is a 45-degree side bend and just doing it really fast. That can be a great way to get a good stretch and that snap back in the core. If you're looking for a movement for high forces and high velocity for core rigidity, then you don't need to look any further than a power clean. You need to accelerate it really fast, you need to meet it, you need to stop it, and this is very similar to a takedown where you're coming in, you're accelerating, you're making an impact, and you're driving through it. So absolutely perfect. If you're looking for flexion and extension, something like a kipping toes to bar is incredible, and it's actually one of the most underrated elements of CrossFit is the fact that they have this powerful kipping. Not many sports do it, and it's so useful for things like jiu-jitsu. So yeah, really love a kipping toes to bar for that flexion and extension. And if you were looking for rotation, something like a rotational kettlebell swing is incredible, or a rotating med ball slam. Those are great as well. So there are a lot of options there, but what we're just looking to do is train our core about as fast as it can go and as hard as it can go and as heavy as it can go. We're trying to put a lot of force through it. We're trying to put a lot of speed through it. And that's going to give you a core that is actually capable of being powerful. And finally, rest appropriately between sets. Now, this is probably the biggest mistake I see people make when they're looking to develop power. They'll do the right movements. They'll do power cleans. They'll do sprints. They'll do box jumps. They'll do all these things. but then they'll rest like 1 to 2 minutes between sets, or they'll run them as a circuit rather than as these maximal effort things. Look guys, if you want to become maximally powerful, then you need to train near maximal power. You can't do 20 box jumps in a row and think you're outputting near max power. You can't do a 100-meter sprint, rest a minute, do a 100-meter sprint and think you're working near maximal power. Now we've already actually mentioned the rest time that we want to use when we were talking about jumps, and that's 3 to 5 minutes. The reason we want to do that is all power movements are going to take place through our creatine phosphate energy system. This is the energy system that develops energy very quickly, allowing us to do powerful things. Now, it only lasts about 10 seconds, which is the reason that we actually do low volume work when we want to develop power. And it also informs why we rest, because the creatine phosphate system takes 3 to 5 minutes to restore fully. So if you're resting below that time and training for maximal power, you are not allowing your energy system to recover enough to train near maximal power, and therefore you can't develop that athletic quality of power. And it is genuinely one of the #1 mistakes I see. So many people, once you just dial in their rest times and force them to actually rest that sort of 3-minute minimum, ideally pushing it to 5, they suddenly start seeing progress, and it can be an absolutely huge one. So those are 3 things you can implement to get so powerful people think you are cheating. Put it into your program, guys. Make sure that you are jumping, 1 to 3 times a week. Make sure you're training your core with high forces at high velocities, and make sure you're resting appropriately. And if you want to get more tips like this, if you want to become more athletic, then subscribe to the channel, because we're going to keep putting out more videos like this every single week.